We are glad you're here this morning. Gene is out at the man camp, and so you have me today. I talked about going out to the man camp, and they took a vote and told me I wasn't man enough to go. So you've got me, and Gene's out there. But Norman Bean's going to lead us in prayer in a minute. Do you have a prayer request this morning? Right. If you'd pray for all those sissies that went to men camp, we'd appreciate it. So, I think they had about 30 some odd go. We had a pretty good group, so that's good. And they had good weather. They talked about earlier in the week about postponing it because they were afraid the rain was going to come in and rain them out. Any other prayer request? Pray for our country, yeah, if you would. Pray for our country, Norman. There's a lot of things going on right now that we need to be concerned about. So. Oh yeah, Jody Sparks. If they are coming, they may be back. I haven't seen any of them this morning. But yeah, we need to be praying for Jody Sparks. So, Phyllis. Oh, the congregation at Lake Homa. Glenn mentioned that last week in the Shepherd's Prayer. And does anybody have any update on that or what's going on, or has any other information come out on that, or do you know? The video has not been revealed. Nothing's come out on that yet? Okay. For those of you not aware, there was a minister in the congregation at Mustang, and he was accused of inappropriately touching a child. And there's always two sides to every story. Another thing, Norman, you might mention is the elders put out a letter to the public on that as to how they're handling it, and they're trying to take care of it in-house. And they went public with it on Facebook, I think. And the emails, the posts that they're getting are just horrible the way they're being treated. It's really, people are vile, and the Lord's church is taking a hit right now as far as all of that. And so anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, Norm, if you had mentioned the church at Mustang. Go ahead if you would.
Almighty God, we approach you this morning as we assemble for this class, and we ask for your blessing as we study your word and become more knowledgeable about you and what you want us to do. We have a number that we'd like to bring before you this morning to remember and ask for blessings on them. A number of our classes in camp this weekend, and we know that they are having a good time and that they will remember you and your son today as part of their activities. We want to remember our country because we're in bad shape at this time from the standpoint that nobody believes anything and everything goes. And particularly, we're experiencing persecution against Christians. We ask, Father, that you help us find a way to stay faithful and to do the best we can to solve our country's problems. We also want to bring before you one of our members, Jody Sparks, that has been experiencing a number of medical problems, that we understand they're on the way back, and that you would bless them as they travel. We also know that one of the local churches is having problems, Lake Homa Church in Mustang, and we ask that you would bless them as they attempt to resolve the things going on there, particularly bless their elders as they solve this problem. We bless you. We love you, Lord, and we ask that you would love us and forgive us of our wrongs. We know that we're not perfect, but we look to you and to our Lord Jesus Christ, that you'll remember us and forgive us. These blessings we ask in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Norman. Gene has been doing a study. Glenn Tunick wrote a series of lessons on a walk through the Bible. He has 17 lessons, and Gene has been following that outline. And but I'm sure he's got his lesson plans in place. This morning we're going to veer off of that, and we're going to talk about the miracles of Jesus this morning, or some of them. How many miracles are recorded? We don't know how many miracles Jesus performed, but how many miracles are recorded in the gospel? Any idea? Well, I just happen to know because I looked it up on the internet. According to this, there's 37 recorded miracles that Jesus performed. And we know that there's probably many more than that. There's a scripture that talks about that if everything he ever completed was written, there wouldn't be enough room. You know the passage. So anyway, out of the 37 miracles that are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which one of those miracles, or which group of those miracles, or which one means something to you? Which one comes to your mind immediately when you talk about the miracle of Jesus? This isn't going to go very well if we don't participate. In a weird sort of way, I think. Well, which was water to wine. And Jesus goes to this wedding. They run out of wine. And his mother tells him, get in there and make them some more wine. Quit stalling. Well, that's not exactly the way it happened, but that's the way it was written in the Chosen. So, sort of. But why is that interesting to you? Right, right. If his mother, right, and that when his mother, when he's in the temple teaching, they're going back home, and he stays in Jerusalem for some period of time, and then they find him. And they chew on him a little bit for not coming with them. And he said, I had to be about my Father's business. And then they talked some about everything he had taught. And then this passage says, and his mother treasured these things in her heart, which indicates she knew. There was something special about this one. And that's a good point, that she knew he could do that. Just go do what you're supposed to do. Norma? Did you raise your, oh, that was the one. How many of you ever heard the song, It's similar to that, but instead of turning water into wine, and I can't remember the guy's name. There's a country singer that has a song years ago that turned the wine into water. You ever heard that song? It's evidently he was an alcoholic at some time, and he gave his life to Christ, and he wrote a song about turn this wine into water. And it talks about all the trials that he went through in life. It's a great song. If you can pull it up on YouTube, it's really a neat song. And I have never been diagnosed, but I self-diagnosed myself as obsessive compulsive. I get on something and I listen to it over. And there was weeks that in the evening I would turn that song, and I don't know why, but I listened to it over and over and over and over again. But there was something about that song that I was really drawn to it, that this guy that was presumably an alcoholic came to Christ, got off alcohol, but wrote a song about turn this wine into water. It's a very good song. I would encourage you to listen to it. Anyone else? You have the words to it. Would you sing it? I don't. I appreciate that, Katie. I appreciate that. But I appreciate it, Katie. Norman, Norman. Right. 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 Yeah. And Norman mentioned about the centurion that had a servant that he asked Jesus to heal. But Jesus didn't have to make the trip to go do that. Because of the centurion's faith, he was healed. And which, here's another situation where we often think that Jesus was taking the gospel to who? Who were the chosen people? The Jewish people were. But there was a lot of his miracles that he performed for people who were not Jewish. And a lot of the miracles were with Gentiles. Matter of fact, we're going to look at a couple of those this morning. Good example. Someone else. Kathy? Okay. Right. Right. Now, Kathy said she liked the one about the lepers. How many lepers did he heal? How many? 10? 10? There were 10 of them, and all of them were healed, and how many came back and thanked him? What is another teaching in that? We're a bunch of ungrateful people. Extremely ungrateful. That do what? Right. Right. And Jesus, Laura pointed out, Jesus, I think I understood what Jesus does good no matter what the return is. And that is so true that if only you, and only you would have been obedient to the cause of Christ, to the gospel, to meet him in baptism, if only one, he would have still died, no matter what the return is. Well, right. Right. Yeah. Laura said most of us would have zapped the 9 that didn't because they weren't doing what they should have done. Good point. Another miracle. We're down to 34. Yeah, Walt. Okay. The woman that happened to be one of the ones that I had marked this morning. Let's look at that. Let's go to Luke chapter 8. Let's read that account. Luke chapter 8. And we start in verse 43. The one in John is a little bit, in Mark, it's a little bit more in depth, but for time's sake, Luke 8:43, if I can get my glasses adjusted, 43, Luke 8:43. And a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and Jesus said, "Who is the one who touched me?" And while they were denying it, Peter said, "Master, the multitudes are crowded and pressing upon you." But Jesus said, "Someone did touch me. I was aware that the power had gone out of me." And when the woman saw that she had could not escape notice, she came trembling and fell down before him and declared in the presence of the Lord of the people the reason why she had touched him and how she had immediately been healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Just the idea of, and the passage in Mark talks about she had spent all of her money. She had seen a lot of different doctors. She had tried and tried and tried. She had had this hemorrhage. She had been bleeding for years. And she was unclean. She couldn't be around her family. And she tried over and over again to see doctors. She had done everything she could do. She heard Jesus was in town. She heard what had happened and what kind of person Jesus was. And she thought to herself, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, if I can just get close enough. And the crowds were pressing him and pressing him. And she reaches out and touches it. She's healed immediately. And Jesus says, "Who touched me?" And Peter, the case in Mark, and Peter said, "What are you talking about? Look at the crowds that are around us. Nobody, how can you?" And the way I've envisioned that happening is that it says that they were denying. Everybody, I didn't touch him. They were afraid they were going to get in trouble. And when she figured out she couldn't escape it, she come back and said, "I'm the one that touched you." And Walt, the reason that this miracle, every time I read of this miracle, the reason it has some personal meaning, I had a sister that started losing blood a few years ago, and they never could figure out. And she had to have, I don't know how many pints in a month, 20 some odd, and that may be an exaggeration, but it was an unbelievable amount of blood. She was in the hospital for transfusions over and over and over again. And when I read this passage, I wonder how many times my sister just wondered if I could just touch the hem of his garment. There's something about that passage that woman's faith was so great that if I could just touch the hem of his garment, everything will be all right. My sister could never touch the hem of his garment, but she was going to have an operation to see, an exploratory operation to see. And I went over to pray with her. They lived in Tulsa, but her grandson went in, and her grandson, she asked her grandson, "Do you think I'm making the right decision? Because the doctors told us you may not come out from under this." She asked her grandson, what do you think? Do you think I'm making the right decision? And they were really, really close. He grew up without a dad, and my brother-in-law and my sister, they kind of raised him. But he said, "Grandma, whatever decision you make, it'll be right. Because when you wake up, and if you see us smile at you, you'll know you made the right decision. But Grandma, if you wake up and see the smile of Jesus on his face, you'll know you made the right decision." This miracle has a special meaning to me because I can relate. My sister was really, really sick for a while. She died 2 years ago. It has a special meaning to me because I think of her and the relationship she had with Jesus. And no matter how sick she got, and no matter how bad things were, she always blessed him. 2 years. Oh, with my sister? Oh, it was a year or so before she passed away. Any other miracles? Laurel? Right. 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 Laura made a good point that another thing with that woman is that if since she was unclean, she could have been punished severely for even being around somebody else. But the end result was worth it to her to go through whatever she had to go through to be healed. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, maybe we're going to talk about it a little bit more later. What are you willing to go through? What are you willing to go through to be healed? She was willing to take a great chance. We're going to look at another passage and look at any other miracles. Right. 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 And that's in Mark 7. Let's look at that. And I don't, sometimes I think I catch a glimpse of what that means. Mark chapter 7 is where Norman's talking about. Mark chapter 7, and let's start in verse 24. Mark chapter 7, verse 24. And from there he rose and went to a region of Tyre, and when he had entered a house, he wanted no one to know it, yet he could not escape notice. But after hearing of him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of the Syrophoenician race, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he was saying to her, "Let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to make the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered and said to him, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "Because of this answer, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter." It's interesting, the terminology they use here. What do you often hear about how or what the Jews looked at the Gentiles as being what? They looked at them as being dogs. This Gentile woman has a daughter that has a demon. Now we're going to look at another passage of a man who had a son that had a demon, and it threw him into the fire and did a lot of things to him. But we don't know a lot about this particular situation other than the woman was a Gentile. She was looked on by the Jews as being worthless, but she knew Jesus was in town, and she had heard stories about what Jesus could do. So she goes to Jesus and says, my daughter has a demon, would you heal her? And his comment is what? It's not good to what? Short translation, it's not good to make bread. You don't bake a beautiful loaf of bread and then sit there and let your kids look at it. They're starving to death, and you take that bread and throw it out to the dogs. What did he mean by that, Tom? That's Kathy. That, Tom made the comment that, in other words, you're no better than a dog. You would feed your children before you would feed your dog, hopefully. And Kathy made the comment that Jesus is saying he's surrounded by all these people. It says he hoped to get into town without notice, but he was noticed. And this woman comes up to him and says, I have a daughter that's demon possessed. Would you heal her? And he said, you wouldn't make a loaf of bread and then let your kids go hungry and feed it. But her comment was what? Even what? The dogs get something. Don't you have anything for me? I admit, in your view, I'm no better than a dog. But what you just told me, Jesus, the dogs get something out of it. Even in the worst situation, don't you have something for me, Gloria? And that's what Kathy, that's what you're saying, that even though she was a Gentile, her faith in the power of Jesus to heal was greater than a lot of the people that were following him. Norman? Right, right. Norman said it even goes back to the promise that all nations would be blessed. And then when Jesus died and rose again and the church was established, that prophecy all came true. But in that situation, the lady was so stressed about her child. She was, here again, she was willing to take a chance. She weighed the cost, and her cost could have been thrown out in total humiliation, but she was willing to take the chance. There's another one in let's go to Mark 9 while we're there. And this is the shorter version of this, Mark 9, beginning with verse 14. And when they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. And immediately when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed and began running up to greet him. And he asked them, what are you discussing with them? And one of the crowd answered him, Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it dashes him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and stiffens out. And I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it. And he answered them and said, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me. And when they brought the boy to him, and when they saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into convulsion, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. And he asked his father, how long has it been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And it has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water, and it destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible to him who believe. And immediately the boy's father cried and began saying, I do believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying, deaf and dumb spirit, I command you to come out of him and do not enter him again. I don't, at some time or another, all of you have probably had a child that was sick. Really, really sick. And you possibly went from one doctor to another doctor to another doctor, and they told you there is no hope. This guy had heard about Jesus. He has a demon-possessed son that throws him into convulsions. One translation talks about him, he throws him into the water and throws him into the fire, and the demon, the evil spirit, has total control over what's happening to the child. And all the dad can do is stand there and watch. So he hears about this guy that has some followers that have been maybe performing miracles. And he takes his son to them and said, would you heal him? And they can't. Jesus gets frustrated. And reading between the lines, and I could be wrong, he said, all things are possible if you believe. And I think what he was saying that more to the disciples that were following him than he was to the man that had the son that was demon-possessed. If you would have believed strong enough, you could have healed this man's son. And then Jesus heals him. He says, I believe, help my unbelief, I believe. And Jesus heals him, and he tells the spirit, don't ever enter him again. Norman asked the question, and the end of that passage says, this kind can only come out by prayer. And thanks, Norman, I deliberately didn't read that because I don't know what that means. I don't. And I've looked at that, and I've read commentaries on it, and everybody has an idea. There's a possibility that, his disciples weren't praying, but I don't think that's right. I don't think Jesus would have put up with people following him. They came to him and said, teach us to pray like John taught his disciples to pray. And he teaches them to pray. I don't think he would have let them follow him if they hadn't been a praying group of people. I don't know what it means, Norman. I don't know. And here's another reason I don't know what it means. If prayer could heal anything, we would have a lot of people with us today that are not. The natural course of things of life takes place. I don't understand that. And I know there's no doubt in my mind that you have been on your knees pleading with God. If it's your will, heal them. But it doesn't have. I don't understand it, Norman. Gloria. Gloria said that the father said, I do believe, and then he said, help my unbelief. I don't, Gloria wants to know if that's the prayer, only this can come out by prayer. That would not be my understanding. My understanding of what the reason the guy says that, and here's strictly my understanding, the guy has watched his son go into convulsions and thrown on the ground. He's gone through this over and over and over again. And the guy comes to him and he said, would you heal him? And he said, and this can come out by belief. If you believe, he can be healed. And it's, in my mind, the guy is saying, oh, I hope. And but he's admitting, I have a little bit of doubt because we've tried everything. But Jesus, yeah. Right. You're right. You'd do anything to help that child. Right. So, and Gloria, that's my understanding. Anyone else have any? Lowell? Right. Right. Yeah. And Lowell made the comment that maybe his followers, although they were given power to do miracles, there could have been a situation where they used them with wrong motives. And this was a situation where Jesus brought God into the situation and totally handled it. And all the credit went to God, and they didn't get any of it. And that could be it. I don't. Right. Uh, do, let me make sure I understand. God has a power beyond what we believe. I mean, what we understand. Do what, Anita? Anita said his ways and his thinking are far beyond. I understand, but the times that I have prayed and prayed and prayed and pleaded, take this, and I don't mean to demean anything, take this burden away from me. Please. I can't take it anymore. But nothing changes. Darlene mentioned, well, what is God's will in the matter? And there's another, the man born blind. And his disciples find this man born blind, and they ask him, who sinned, him or his parents? Well, one thing that would indicate, if he was born blind, that would indicate a little bit that a baby can sin, which we know that's not right. And Jesus said what? Who did he say sinned? Neither of these sinned, but this happened for what purpose? So that the glory of God may be presented today. And then he goes through this, and matter of fact, it's several verses long. That miracle is several verses long. He heals the man, he spits on his eye. He doesn't spit on his eye. Anyway, however he does that, he heals him. And he goes away, and then he comes back, and they get into the deal with the Jewish tribal group, and they want to know who was the guy that healed him, and his parents have it out with them. He's grown, go ask them. They didn't want to take any responsibility. They didn't want to claim Jesus did it. And so they totally ignored the whole deal, and finally Jesus finds him, and he said, do you know who I am? And he said, yeah, you're Jesus. And it was by your power that I was healed. The man born blind, sometimes things happen in our life that God is using that thing, that terrible thing in your life, that He might be glorified. Huh? Anita said, we don't tell the potter how to mold the clay. And I needed to hear that, Anita, but I don't appreciate it. I do what? All things work to good. Here, Gloria, she just finds out Anita's really hammered me. Now she's twisting that knife that Anita just put in my back. So all things work together for good for those, Romans 8:28. Yeah, right. Does it? When we make a wrong choice, yeah, that's true. Things work out for good for those who love the Lord and want things according to His will. Okay? Right. Right.
It says that in all.
Okay, that is the interpretation. God can grow good out of the bad circumstance. And it's not that His will for something to happen, Glenna. Not according, and there you go again. Not according to our will. Lowell? Right. Lord said that he went up in the hospital and the lady in the next room was dying of cancer. But her positive attitude, everybody around her, I visited with a man that he knew the time it was at the end. And he one of the last things he told me, he said, Joe, I know one thing for sure. I'm not going to a better place. I'm going to the very best place. That attitude is everything. Everything. I wonder, Anita wants to know, maybe he trusted him, but he didn't have enough, and that's the reason he said, I believe, but help my unbelief. If there's anything in my being that says I don't believe enough, change that. There's one other passage I want to share with you before the other. Let's go to Luke 18. Luke 18. Here's another miracle. Verse 35. Luke 18, verse 35. And it came about, he was approaching Jericho, a certain blind man was sitting by the road, and hearing a multitude going by, he began to inquire what this might be. And he told that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, and he called out, saying, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And those who led the way were very sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and commanded, and he brought it to him. And when he had come near, he questioned him, what do you want me to do for you? And he said, Lord, I want to regain my sight. And we know the Lord healed him. How's your eyesight today? What are you seeing today? Every time I read this passage, it makes me reflect. Where am I spiritually today? How's your eyesight? What do you see when you look at Jesus? Here's a guy that we looked at one case of where a man was born blind. This guy says, I want to regain my sight. Possibly some of you have been in a situation where at one time you had an extremely strong personal relationship with Jesus. And you got cataracts, or you got glaucoma. Something happened. And you're at the point now, you've had so many bad things happen in your life, and things have not turned out right. And what you thought was going to be good turned out rotten. And you're now at the point to where, Lord, I want to regain my sight. I can't see you anymore. I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm trying. I'm trying everything I know to do, but I can't find you now. Where are you? Glenna said that she had a niece that was 45 years old that was dying of cancer, and she wrote a letter that was read at her funeral. And when she was first diagnosed with cancer and going through all the treatment and all the junk, she asked, why me, why me, why me? And then she changed her mind, why not me? I have Jesus. What better way for it to end? That's the hope we all need to have. How's your eyesight? How is your spiritual eyesight today? If you notice in this passage, he said, I want to regain my sight. And Jesus said, be healed. Your faith has made you well. Don't give up. Don't give up. Thank you. Gene will be back next week. Appreciate it.